Welcome to Convention Reviews. Today we'll be talking about MoTownCon 2024. This convention takes place in Concord, North Carolina, which is a little bit east of Charlotte, North Carolina. The event itself was held at the Cabarrus Center and Arena. The event center itself is used for a wide variety of different purposes, from trade shows to wrestling matches to graduations, among many others. As of this weekend, there also was early voting that was going on at this event as well, which was definitely an interesting touch that I have not seen at other events. Originally, MoTownCon was held in Mooresville, North Carolina, which is home of NASCAR. The event planners decided to move to a much more centralized location for this year's event. The thing that makes MoTownCon very unique is that it is a celebration of itasha vehicles. These are vehicles that are wrapped in anime, comic book, and other nerd-related wraps, and typically of an anime nature. The event itself was split into two parts. The outside had most of the larger vehicles present, which represented a lot of the outgoing cars to kind of pull up and be, presented. And in the inside were a lot of the vendors as well as some of these smaller vehicles. The interesting aspect about this fandom is that it has a high level of customability to it, where a lot of people will go with very different views on their particular vehicles. Some will do just a hood, some will do a full wrap. Even the kinds of series that people cover will do a whole lot of variety, from very mainstream properties to more niche titles as well, which is a really cool kind of concept of it. As well as really taking their own kind of flair to it, because the thing that makes this very unique is that a lot of the artwork is original. Some people do get some uh, copies from the official work, but it really is a level that there's an infinite level of creativity and originality with these types of vehicles. I will definitely say that from my experience from last year, the interior venue was a major step up from it last year. It definitely had way more vendors than the previous year, but on top of that, it also had a lot of creativity as well. There was a VR section also set up for guests, which was pretty fun, especially considering that these events tend to be very popular with these. There also was a nice little charity auction for birds for the western part of the state, which is pretty cool. One of the things I will say, though, that was a little bit of a mixed reaction was a bit of the panels. It was kind of shoved into a corner of the venue, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but the fact that because the room has no walls, everything echoed like no tomorrow, and they actually needed to pull in a speaker system halfway through the first panelist stuff just so people could hear them do their presentation, which a little bit of a disappointment, but kind of live and learn. Another featured event of MoTownCon was a maid cafe. This was another kind of small event that was kind of put towards the back of the room. That actually was pretty popular from what I could see. They had at least one or two, settings for this, and they were practicing and getting everything set up in the morning. So it seemed like a lot of guests were pretty excited for this particular event as well. One of the other booths that was at MoTownCon was also featuring one of the companies that essentially is working on getting a lot of these skins for a lot of these vehicles. I believe they are one of the main organizers for MoTownCon as well. And really, they gave a really interesting case of how they design a lot of these different cars. As you can see here in the book, one of the cars that was outside actually did have that design on there, and really showing the level of interesting customability to a lot of these vehicles. And really kind of showing the steps of the first half of having to make a design for the very specific vehicle or the surface you're covering, and then it kind of gets passed off to another skilled tradesman who will then apply the wrap to the vehicle itself. But for me, one of the things that was really interesting about MoTownCon that separated it from a lot of other conventions is the fact that this is probably the first time I've ever seen a live wrapping of a itasha vehicle up close and personal. Like I had mentioned earlier, once the design has been worked on, you have to have somebody actually apply it to the vehicle itself. And it's a very painstaking process, to say the least. The individual that was at the convention actually owns the vehicle and does this, I guess, as a side gig or as their main job. It was really kind of interesting from the minute I walked in the door and to, coming back about once every hour to just kind of check up and see where, the current progress of it was. And, really seeing like how it, slowly getting molded to the vehicle and, working around it. Interestingly enough, it was actually a father-son duo who were working on it. Interesting to see how the overall, design came out. I will say that by the time I had left in the afternoon, they had only gotten about one side of the vehicle and were just starting on the hood. But I mean, just the level of detail and craftsmanship that went into it was absolutely amazing. I will say that it is really interesting, especially when they hit the point where they have to start doing the handles or like contours that require like a second piece be put on top of it. So like they're cutting and ripping pieces of it, or they're cutting it in a little bit so it's a little bit better put together. So definitely a really interesting process to watch, to say the least. But, that's really one of the things I love about this kind of fandom is the fact that, they took something that is, used in a lot of other different trades and, combining it together into, something that's a little bit more on a nerdy spectrum that you don't really often see. Overall, I had a really great time at MoTownCon. The convention only cost about $19 in total between parking and the entrance ticket. And, it was really interesting to see a wide variety of different vehicles and skins that people had put onto stuff. Really getting to meet some of the owners and kind of getting to talk about them and like where they had come from. And, really was a great way to kind of, have a good afternoon of it. I will say that I really hope that this convention continues in the future and stays at this current venue. It's always interesting to come back next year and see what new vehicles will show up and what new designs people will come up with. That will be my review for MoTownCon 2024. If you are a fan of itasha vehicles or attended this convention, please feel free to write. I'm really interested to see if anybody else attended this convention, and you will see me in the next convention review.